Go for it.
So we were thinking about what we could talk about today, and the word tragedy came to my mind. What is
Tragedy.
tragedy? What is the
Mm.
tragic? And
What
I
is the
don't have
tragic?
any kind of idea yet. It was just a word that appeared in my mind, like bing, tragedy. What is
Mm.
tragedy? And what's the function of tragedy? And are we in a tragic world, a post-tragic world?
Well, the first thing that comes
What's the difference between this nihilistic sort of view that everything is fucked and we're destroying the planet and everything is and being in a different space than that?
yeah. I mean, I've read a book about story devices
Mm-hmm.
in literature. And so you have like four main categories of literature that is comedy, drama, tragedy, and uh, love story, I think, or romance. And
Right.
origin and I think and the original argument was that those story devices, those kind of narrations, stem from our observations from nature, right? And so you
Hmm.
have tragedy correlating to winter because everything
Right. Ah.
dies,
Uh-huh.
right? And so you have comedy, you have the spring, you have the drama, it's the fall, and so on and so forth.
And
Mm.
what's the fourth one? What would be the
Yeah, it's like
so
drama.
what would be the summer then?
Yeah, summer is you have comedy, you have tragedy, you have drama. What's the fourth one? Is it romance? It must be romance. So that would
So
be spring.
romance, summer is the spring is the romance and summer is the comedy.
Yeah,
Right.
something.
That makes total sense. I never thought about that before. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Because tragedies always end in death, right? The
right,
tragedies are how we navigate death inside of ourselves, on a psychological level. So we have to go through this catharsis, right?
right.
It's interesting. I just had some news that my knee, which I thought I told you this before the interview, which I thought I had this bacteria and I thought I was going to go have an operation. And then I found out that it was okay. I was expecting to go through this intense process where I had to, recover and be in the hospital and go through that kind of a hellish experience. But it's not there anymore. And I felt kind of disappointed.
The tragedy is not complete.
There's no tragedy. I felt empty. I felt empty somehow. It's like because this health problem has taken up so much of my energy and my life and time and so much of my being that without it there was a kind of a void. It's like, okay, I was preparing myself for this incredible sort of drama, and then nothing happened. So here I am, and I'm like, I felt a little bit
Oh,
empty about that afterwards.
we
I was
were
like,
robbed of the climax of the tragedy.
I was robbed of the yes, this climactic moment, and it turned out to be a bit of a comedy.
Right.
Or it
But
turned
which is
out to be. It
interesting.
turned out to have not a happy ending, but a resolution instead of a destruction. It turned out to be, let's say, turned out to be like fall instead of winter, or I don't know what.
Oh, well, it is a happy ending, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a happy ending. Like it's a comedy then, right? Because
Yeah,
comedies are
but what
happy,
I think
have a happy
what you're
ending.
saying is missing. We have the saying, the darkest moment before the light. No, one is the darkest
The
moment.
dawn, yeah, the dark before the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
dawn.
And
Yeah.
so you need in terms of seasons, you need the moment in February. When it's like all is lost in a kind of way from the previous
Hmm.
season, and
Yeah.
to have this tipping point where it tilts, and then the spring comes up and the new thing. But you have to touch base with death in
You
a
have to
kind of
touch
way.
base with death, and that's what tragedies are all about, right? They're
Yeah,
reconciling that.
yeah.
So,
It's interesting because you have Rebel Wisdom, for example,
mhm.
touching death, and now they're like moving on to different kind of things. I think David Fuller is going to Perspectiva, and I don't know what
Yeah, I
Alexander.
saw that and I felt almost sad about that because it's the end of an era. Not sad like in any grandiose sense, but it's like, oh, that period is over and there's a movement into
Yeah,
another realm.
it's
There's
not.
kind of a
It's not.
mourning for one period and moving into another period.
Yeah, It's
Mhm.
not classically a tragedy, but you know, when I think of tragedy, I always think of Shakespeare. You know, when it's clear that uh, you know, despite all our best or worst efforts, everything will lead in death and despair.
Right, right. There's certain aspects of tragedy, right? In the Greek, right? There has to be a major character. I forget what they all are.
Yeah,
I think it was, I don't know, Aristotle or something's definition of tragedy. One of them, the character has to be, there has to be a fatal character flaw,
right.
and there has to be like bad circumstance,
I mean, Macbeth
possible,
is the prime example, no?
mhm. And Hamlet, and there has to be a sort of, there has to be some sort of deception or inversion, right? And then then conflict. I forget what the classical modes of tragedy are, but it's really it's well defined. The Greeks defined it, very well, and all tragedies have to have these aspects to them to be a classical tragedy.
Is Hamlet actually a tragedy or is it a drama?
Oh, it's a tragedy.
Right.
Hamlet has a character flaw. It's hubris,
Mm.
a hubris, and there's also characteristics of a tragic character, you know.
Because there's a
So
difference between Hamlet and Macbeth, as far as I remember.
what's the
Because
difference?
because Macbeth has this character flaw, but it's clear that everything will turn out badly. Whereas, you know, have you seen The Northman with the Skarsgård with the fella?
Not
So
yet. I've been meaning
that's
to see that. Yeah.
so that's the original story for Hamlet. And I
Ah.
don't know if he dies at the end at the original story.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
um, he kills his father, no? Wasn't it like no, he kills who does
And
Hamlet kill?
Hamlet, no, Hamlet doesn't kill his father. His father comes to him as a ghost.
Right, that was yeah, exactly. Mm.
Yeah, his father comes to him as a ghost. And then there's the madness of Ophelia
Yeah.
and various elements. Um, but anyway, this question of sort of, I think people today are kind of feel like they're living in a tragedy.
Yeah, that's true.
Like they feel like the environment is collapsing. That there's this that they're heading towards some kind of Armageddon or something.
Or is it not more the fall, the drama that everything turns to shit? Because the tragedy would be the state of despair, you know? It's
Yeah.
like oh no, we actually did fuck it up and there's no way out of this.
Yeah, but there's a catharsis to tragedy, right?
Right.
Um, John Vervaeke was describing this in terms of like the difference between, let's say, like a Frankenstein or Dracula or a classical monster, and then the zombie. The zombie is post-tragic because there's no narrative involved, right? There's no catharsis.
Yeah.
It's just the monstrosity is kind of permanent, and you kill one zombie and another zombie comes up, and there's nothing happens. It's just completely uh, um, completely nihilistic. Whereas a
Yeah.
tragedy isn't nihilistic because it gives the audience a catharsis.
Yeah.
It allows us to live through that small death so that we can live again, be born again, so that spring will come again.
Yeah.
But in Zombieland, spring never comes. It's just always Zombieland, right?
Mm. You know what? I'm wondering how much there and what to what extent there's a correlation between our distancing ourselves from nature, you know, through civilization and
Mm-hmm.
and the up, you know, the emergence of, you know, these storytelling devices coming back and connecting us to these eternal rhythms of life, because it's like the more we civilize ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
the more profound we are embedded in the seasonal kind of narratives, you know. Oh no, this is like a bad time and everything turns to shit, and you know, so you know what I'm saying.
I think so.
So
Yeah.
so because like when you're like thinking, you know, 60,000 years back, We were like kind of embedded in nature, and we didn't need these storytelling devices to, we hadn't developed storytelling to that sense at that point. And then we through agriculture and through the process of civilization, we kind of mirrored, through storytelling, the seasons that we are previously being part of, right?
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting difference between mythical storytelling, right, and then the realism that develops. According to Girard, when the Hebrew Bible comes in, and then we have a sort of realism in storytelling, right? Before storytelling used to be completely fantastical and mythological, and it was about the gods kind of warring in heaven. And then the Hebrew Bible comes along and kind of brings a realism to it basically kills all the gods.
Yeah.
And says there's only one God, and then there's one God, and then there's man and his drama. It's no longer the drama of the gods, it's the drama of human existentiality.
Right.
That is, so we start to begin to play a part in the drama rather than just being victims of the fates or something like that.
Yeah, but the point is, it's like everything is narrative.
Yes.
And so because that's our way to domesticate chaos and to domesticate the world we're living in. So
yes.
if we would get rid of all the narratives that we have, there would be no way to understand what a door is, let's say, or what to do with a door, how to understand the world, how to understand weather or whatever. There would be no way to interact with the world if we wouldn't have. So.
Right. I mean, that's naming things, and if you name something, then it suddenly becomes an entity separate from everything else, right? So we create this dualism through our naming, and we create this reduction of reality so that we can understand reality, right? It's like the Simsum in the Hebrew thing. It's this reduction, which allows us to navigate reality.
Yeah, but reality
and then we create a narrative structure to that. We create a narrative structure to that with hierarchies and chains of being and dimensionality, which doesn't exist in the pure state.
Have you read the newsletter of Alex Ebert, the last one, about the honest liar and about the Consilience Project?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I did read it.
Because he raises an interesting point there. Because I mean, I don't know if you have seen the Chappelle thing where he talks about Donald Trump, and he was kind of referring to that because Chappelle said that Trump was an honest liar. He said no, so he said, and Alex in his kind of a newsletter said the problem with the Consilience Project was that it wasn't communicating enough, that it's also kind of conspiring in a kind of way, and it was presenting itself
as being objective, understanding a thing where it's actually an objective way to understand ideology that is actually ideology,
right? And so, but we always do this. We always have we are embedded in ideology and narration right now, right? We can't escape it. When we talk about reality, that's a narration. There is just unstructured chaos outside of the realm of narration, and so everything we do is a process of constructing perception and mapping. And
just a moment, sorry, I have to I'm in a podcast, honey, give me 10 minutes. Sorry, my wife is calling me. You'll have to cut that out.
Yeah, sure.
Excuse me.
And so that's what I find so interesting, that we are still. So there's this process, and that was once outside of us. It's now integrated, So we had like the idea of ghosts and external voices, and through the process of conscious evolution, we kind of integrated that, and now know that, these are internal voices, ego voices or whatever, or it's our own. It's like the idea of Julian James, of the bicameral mind, that if you look at early literature, there's no concept of I. They're just these voices. And then we conceptualize these voices as ghosts, and now we know it's part of ourself, it's part of our internal processing. And
is it really part of our internal processing? Do you want to reduce that to our own subjectivity?
No, well, I'm just saying what Julian James says, his model of the bicameral mind, right? It's a controversial model, but if you look at early literature, there is no I, there is no individuality, they're just voices. And now I can say, oh, that's my own thought.
Yeah, right? But what I'm saying is what I want to. I think there's a next step that you can go from there. That it's not my, because it's still individual. It's still many voices. It's not like something within me.
Right. I don't. What is it then?
It's not. It's not something inside, because there is no inside and there is no me. That's also sort of another kind of illusion.
Right.
It's not.
Exactly.
It's not quite the non-dual view of the world. It's like God appeared as a burning bush, right? Because we can't see God, because to see him directly would mean to die. So God appears as a burning bush, but this doesn't mean that the God has any side. There's the front and the back of God, right? And that. It just means that our perception is locked in there being a duality, or there being this external voice.
Right. But
am I making any sense here?
Yeah, but nonetheless, there is a process of integration that you can view through evolution.
Yes, sure.
So, and that's what I'm referring to. So we're still treating some narratives like tragedy, to come back to that, or other narrative ways of structuring our world, as something that is happening to us. We are not masters of our own narration. We're still embedded in something that we view as outside. You get what I'm saying? Oh, the world is going to shit. No, I'm employing kind of that narrative. That's a different approach.
Yeah. So
you know what I'm saying?
So when you work on the narrative, you change your perception of the world.
Right.
So, and also there's the idea of you're just being stuck with a parasitical narrative, right? Somebody's saying blah, blah, blah about something, and then you repeat blah, blah, blah. And there's these parasitical narrative ideologies or egregores, which people are possessed by, and they just repeat what the egregore is saying. And they believe it's their own internal voice that's saying it, but there's actually no will behind, or consciousness or anything behind it. It's just a repetition.
Yeah.
Whereas the next stage would be like start to question all of those egregores, which leads to a kind of a shock. Because like, if we don't have these ideologies speaking through us, then who am I? Without all this ideology.
Yeah.
The whole world collapses, and then we think we're in kind of nihilism, or the death of God, and then we arise again in the post-tragic, where we're playing with the divine, right? We're not separate from it. We're not separate from all these collective spirits, so to speak.
Yeah. Lots of people are just copies in a kind of sense, because they're repeating the egregores that are, kind of floating around. And so Robert Anton Wilson, he had this funny exercise, and he says, in that kind of words, at that moment when you use the word is, something is, then you're possessed by an egregore, because nothing is.
Yeah.
Right? Because as soon as you say, oh, this is Platonist or whatever, no, you employing that kind of narrative. Or
if you say it is not also, right? It's not is or is not.
As soon as you use the word is, you're possessed by a
concretization of reality, or what the Jews would call the Simsum, the contraction of reality.
Yeah,
sure. Sure.
And s- and so
And so I guess the process of evolution is learning to recognize all of these contractions of reality and see their transparency in some way.
yeah, and the arbitrariness, is it a word in English? Arbitrariness,
Yes, and there
arbitrarity.
are, yeah, I see it, and their arbitrariness, even though they might appear to be part of a structure,
Yeah,
the structure is empty, and there's no final reified form at all anywhere in it to anything. It's just an open field.
yeah. That's a strange phenomenon in meditation. When it's like every time when you like had a hard day, and then you think about something that you thought is kind of concrete, like a monetary problem or a relationship problem, then you go into a meditation and you see, oh no, that was just a story that I told myself, and I
Yeah,
thought that was reality, but no, it's not. It's just a thing that you tell yourself.
yeah, exactly. And all of these narratives that we have, we're always telling ourselves narratives, which we need to do. That's relative reality. But then when you transparencies of those narratives,
Yeah.
then you feel a great relief because you're no longer possessed by them and controlled by them and deranged by them. You can just see them playing themselves out in whatever form they would like to manifest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the question then is, if you have the internal distance or playfulness and not the non-attachment to the egregores and to the narratives yourself, when you have that detachment on one side, then you have the ability and the freedom to choose in a kind of way the narratives. um
Yeah. And then that's like a sort of alchemical process, right?
right,
You're,
but
you're
which narratives do
transforming
you
you're
choose?
transforming the raw poison of ideology or narrative into something that is now living because it's being transformed into something that is an actual, let's say, idea or an actual expression.
In a kind of way that mirrors our talk before the recording, because then the question arises, what kind of narrative do you choose? Right, this is what I wanted to express earlier.
Yeah.
Right.
You choose the best narrative, like you choose the ultimate narrative, the highest narrative, the greatest narrative, the best narrative. You choose
which
the
which
greatest view, right?
which one is that?
The non-dual view, of course. Like the
No, but you can't act with a non-dual perspective
no,
narrative
but
in the
you
world.
can't act with it, but you aspire to that and you view everything through that as best you can until it becomes a reality. So even though you're not enlightened, you have the enlightened view. But if you don't have a view at all, then things are just random and you kind of you're like Saint Exupery and you crash your airplane into the ocean somewhere because you have no view.
But can you act without the view?
Can you act without a view? I don't think you can until you're fully immersed in the actuality of that view.
Yeah, but that's the question. So if you're not attached to narratives in general, if you know there is no is, right, and you have this internal state of
You
freedom.
know it intellectually, or you know it from or do you know it in your being? Like
Let
there's a
me
difference.
rephrase that. Let me
Yeah.
rephrase that
Yeah.
to make it more palpable. So last time we talked a couple of times about the mechanism, about the sacrifice and confronting chaos. I think
Yeah.
last time we talked about this. And so, okay, so you have the sacrifice. You sacrifice your attachment to all narratives, right?
Yeah.
And so you're free. So that makes you able to wrestle with chaos in a kind of sense, and to concretize and to crystallize something new, a new
Hmm.
narrative that with
Yeah.
which you want to engage with the world,
Yeah.
because you can only engage in the world if you have a crystallized narrative,
Hmm.
right? So which one
A
do you
reified
choose?
narrative. No, but it can't be a crystallized narrative. Otherwise, it's already dead. It has to be a transparent narrative. So you have to be able to see through that at the same time. Because if your narrative is too is too fixed and it becomes dead. It's no longer living. It becomes a dogma, your own,
I meant crystallized in a different way. Yes, you're right.
crystallized in the sense of translucency and transparency. And
I meant that you crystallized in the form of you have the chaos, and out of that you create a form, a Gestalt, right? And with that you kind of act in the world.
Yes, and but that as soon as you've created that Gestalt, then the Gestalt is dying already, right? And then so you're moving towards the next Gestalt. So there's no final crystallization. That's my only point. I'm sorry. Is this something that I'm not understanding that you're saying?
No. We're having a perfectly normal conversation. But even that, what you're saying is a narrative.
Yes, you use narrative, yeah, because it's a view. It's not a realization. It's an intellectual view.
No, it's a map. It's
a map.
If you can take, let's say, Hinduism, and you can completely take it away as a model of, way to enlightenment or whatever, and what's left is just unstructured chaos, right?
Yeah. So you have to have a map. Otherwise, you're not going to go anywhere. You're just going to be stuck. Yeah. And then, but you have to also be kind of finessing and changing your map a little bit, calibrating your map. It's like a Google map. You go the wrong direction and it tells you should go a bit this way. And so it's a dynamic map. It's not a static map. It's not a map that says this is the territory. It's a map that shows the territory that's shifting, and then you're also shifting at the same time. Kind of a dynamic map would be a good spiritual map. Doesn't have a final absolute dogma. It has these structures that you use and that constantly reveal something. The structure might seem to be the same, but it's always revealing some new aspect of itself.
Right.
So what were we talking about again?
No, we're talking about tragedy and narration and
tragedy,
how we are embedded, either embedded or the active creators of our narration, because we need a narration if we want to go to the shop and buy some milk, right?
Yes. That's like, and if we don't want our lives to be tragic.
No. It's like, it is kind of tragic if we don't use our human potential of being in the world.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. We can't have like a complete non-dual perspective on there, because then we can't act.
Yeah, so it's the non-duality of duality and non-duality.
Right.
That's that's the view, not just non-duality, because then that doesn't say anything. That's just undifferentiated.
And so, and if you have the duality, then you delve necessarily into the deep structures of your own self-narration, and then you have to find a way to harmonize all of this to kind of fit to the grander narration of non-duality and bring that all together. And that's an arduous process, because it's like you always have to realign yourself. Do I make any sense? I don't know.
Yeah, that's why Gurdjieff called it the work, right?
Yeah.
There's all these new Advaita people who are just telling you about the absolute all the time, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody.
No.
It's totally useless. Like Krishnamurti's teaching is totally useless because he doesn't give you any map at all. He just tells you that it's the absolute. The absolute. What do I do with that? I'm a human being. I'm a complex structure, and I need to go through these different stages in order to understand that fully. So yeah, we need a map and we need stages, but in the beginning you can understand that the whole process is transparent intellectually and you keep going until you understand it in your entire being.
Yeah. You know what the weird thing is? So, and I bet I bet you know what I'm talking about. So you're preoccupied with something, right? It's like you have some issues or some problems, and you're like in this kind of state that you don't find your way through to synchronize to manage all of this, right? Then you go into meditation and you get rid of all of this. You or that was an is, and you get rid of all the shells of and layers of meaning making. And at one point where you touch base with death, suddenly
the answer appears. Yeah.
Then the answer, like kind of out of nowhere, appears, and you all the different things that you couldn't harmonize before find their harmonious way of weaving itself into the future.
So the work is not like you're constructing something, right? You're not constructing the truth. You're unveiling your obstacles to seeing and embodying the truth. You're never constructing the truth. The truth reveals itself through you peeling off layers or taking off veils or more and more, then something appears that seems to be the truth. But you didn't construct it. What you did was you removed your obstacles towards seeing it. So what do we construct? Yeah,
but the question is, in a kind of way, you are constructing that because you're a participant in that process. You are engaging in that process to get rid of all of this for the one, and you touch base with death. It's the tragedy. You allow yourself to be to die. And then in springtime the new life appears. I don't know what it is, but the new idea that kind of weaves everything together. I don't know.
So
that idea I'm not creating. That happens to me, but everything before I'm kind of doing. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Like it's like when you construct a mandala or something. Like you create this entire structure, and then you sweep it away, throw it in the river, like the sand turns into sand. But you have to you do the construction. There's a paradox there, right? There's a paradox of creation and destruction because we have to do the work, what Gurdjieff calls the work, in order for the result to appear. We can't construct the result, but we have to do the work.
Yeah.
There's kind of a paradox because we don't make it, we can't do it. We're not the doer, but we have to do everything up to the point that we're not the doer. So it's also it's the massive work.
Yeah.
To get into the non-doing, the doing of not doing, or something they call it in Chinese, the wu wei.
But where does this new narrative that you kind of you get rid of all the attachments?
Where does it come from?
The new harmonizing narration, what you do, the path forward, kind of appears out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Crystallized, that's what I meant. And so then you can employ it till the narrative creates so much mess that you need a new way forward to harmonize it again, because you started to believe that narrative is kind of true.
Yeah, right? You started to reify the narrative and turn it into a dogma.
Right. And then you create a mess, a cognitive mess. Then you need to go back into meditation, distance yourself from that, and then and so that is like it's such an interesting process.
Yeah, it's like the feminine is considered a contraction, right? It creates birth, and the body is it puts you in a body, right? You're born in a body. It's kind of a contraction, right? And then the masculine is just this energy, the billions of sperms, like, going in a main direction. It needs a contraction, it needs to be brought into form, and then it dies, and then a new form arises. And so it's this contraction, and then explosion again, and then contraction. And so we keep going back and forth between emptiness and form, contraction, and, in breathing in, when you breathe in, you can't just breathe in. You also have to breathe out. So you can't just accumulate knowledge and structures and ideas. You also have to let them go for a new embodiment of those structures to arise.
Yeah.
I gotta go, Tom.
Right. Good.
I'm sorry to cut it off kind of like that, but my wife I can feel her. She needs me with the kids.
All right, Andrew.
I could probably do this for another 2 hours, but
yeah, sure.
Anyway.
Have a nice weekend, Andrew. What a nice talk.
You too. We'll talk
Yeah.
soon. Cheers. See ya.
Yes.